Welcome to The Hats. The Hats is a weekly podcast hosted by licensed marriage and family therapist and author Melissa Dumaz and attorney and business owner Kerri Harper Howie. Do you balance different hats? Do you want to figure out how to add another hat to your current stack? Then you've come to the right place.
Being called a power woman is more than it seems and comes with responsibility.
In each episode of The Hats, Melissa and Kerri will share their personal challenges and wins in a world where they wear friend, mommy, business owner, wife, chef, author, and so many other hats every day.
It's just believing in yourself and your abilities.
Listen in for practical tips on how to keep your hats upright, how to handle life when one of your hats gets lopsided, and plenty of real-life solutions to help you balance the many hats you wear daily.
Welcome back to the Hats Podcast. This is your co-host, Melissa Dumaz, and I have here with me today my co-host.
Hi, Hatters. Could not be more excited to be here with you today.
Yay! And she's so excited that she forgot to tell you her name.
Oh,
Her name is Kerri Harper Howie, okay?
I am Kerri Harper Howie. Sorry, I am so excited. Yes.
As you can see, Hatters, we are coming at you today in a very different way. Usually we come to you through your ears, which this episode will be available later through your ears. But today we are live. And what makes today so special is we are celebrating our 100th episode. Yay. So today marks 100th episode in the beginning of 5th season of the Hats Podcast, and it has been a journey, but we're excited to celebrate with you in this way. So thank you for joining us.
Oh my goodness, 100, right? A century, centennial, so many celebratory words come with we've hit 100.
Yeah.
And, in TV, which we're not TV, but, celebrating that 100th episode in TV is a really big deal. So, as I just reflect back on what it took to get to 100, it's like we literally launched and our podcast has been out for the pandemic.
Yes.
I mean, that 100 episodes was created and put out into the world during one of the world's most difficult times. So, I mean, what a milestone. I'm so excited.
Yes, a huge milestone. And to add on to what Kerri was sharing about, what 100 means and the celebration of that. In my mind, I'm thinking 100, I'm thinking bing bings, I'm thinking 100 crispy dollar bills. I'm thinking champagne. I'm thinking all the things to celebrate. But today, Hatters, we are celebrating, and we're also going to be talking about authenticity. Yeah. As Kerri and I were preparing and brainstorming for this episode and thinking about what we wanted to share with our Hatters today and what we wanted the topic to be, we realized that we have not done the authenticity hat. And so that will be today's episode, the authenticity hat. We are going to be keeping it 100 for our 100 episodes. So, Kerri, let's talk about authenticity. What does that mean for you?
So, as you said, we were preparing for this and we thought authenticity, and really a part of that, right, is keeping it 100, keeping it real. And really it's about being true and real to ourselves. It's not about being real or true to anyone else. Presenting your most authentic self really means figuring out what your core values are, what matters most to you, what's inside of you, and then making sure that what you communicate to the world is a reflection of that. So are you demonstrating through both your actions and your words and your deeds things that are true to what's inside of you? And I think that matters for a number of reasons. First of all, for your own sanity, trying to present something to the world that you aren't, frankly, I think will be exhausting. And you really don't want to have yourself in a state of trying to keep up with all of the varying lives that you're presenting to the world. And I think the flip side of that is if you present something that's not you to the world, they don't really know who you are. So people don't know how to enter sincere, authentic, genuine relationships with you, which means you are going to be in turmoil and your relationships are not going to be real.
Right.
So what about you? What does authenticity mean for you?
Very similar concept. Some of the things that come to mind for me are being true to what my core values are, being true to what my beliefs are, being true to what resonates with me. And as you said earlier, keeping it real, representing myself and showing up in the world and also in my alone time without the mask, taking the mask off and not showing up as my representative, but showing up as my true authentic self. And some of the things that I've come to learn is that authenticity is a magnet.
Mm.
You can show up in the world with the mask on and think like, oh, people are going to like this or people are going to like that. But the truth is that people are magnetized to authenticity, to people that are honest, open, and that keep it real. And we're using this term keep it real, but I want to give a disclaimer on that. When I think of keeping it real, I think of authenticity, I think of honesty, I think of truth, but I don't think of keeping it real as hurtful.
Mm.
A lot of
Yes.
times people have this misconception that to be honest, to be truthful, or I'm just keeping it real, I'm just going to tell you how it is, that means that it has to come with hurt or with pain. Like truth that does not have to be weaponized. If anything, tell me the truth, but tell me the truth in love.
Yes. I mean, two really important things that I want to comment on. And you said it's not about having the representative for yourself be the person who shows up in the world. And, as Black women, we sometimes feel compelled to present different images to the
Mm-hmm.
world. And we may feel like we have to represent ourselves in a way that's not necessarily our most authentic self. So I don't want to make it seem as though it's always easy, because sometimes when you're navigating different environments, you may feel as though in order to thrive in this environment, I can't present my most authentic self because there are
Mm,
assumptions made about me as a Black woman. I have to send in my Black woman representative because
right.
they're not going to accept the true Black woman that I am. And that really comes up in, how we wear our hair,
Mm-hmm.
in styles that we may choose to wear in our clothing, in the speech that we use. Sometimes we use speech at home that we don't use in the workplace. And so, I want to acknowledge that sometimes there is a balancing act. But ultimately, I think what we're trying to communicate is whatever your core is, even if that core looks a little bit different, it's not inconsistent. Different does not necessarily mean inconsistent. And navigating in different environments, you don't have to present an unauthentic self. What you can do is present maybe a different version of yourself, but it's still true. The core is still there. And then, the last thing that you said, Mel, I mean, I think it's so, gosh, Pastor Bell talks about this all the time. And I remember one week we were in church and this woman got up and she said, I'm a teacher, and this kid asked me if I missed him over the weekend. And I said, no, I did not. And she said, I was just keeping it real. And, for someone like me, I will acknowledge I'm a very authentic person. It's very difficult for me to pretend to be something else. I subscribe to that belief. And I was always like, I want you to keep it real with me, so I'm gonna keep it real with you, not being sensitive to exactly what you said, Mel. And so I own up to the fact that I have had my moments where I think in my desire to keep it real, I probably was a little bit more harsh than I
Mm,
should have been.
mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so those 2 points really spoke to me, Mel, because it's so true. It's so often we have to find that balance.
Right.
And it's not just like running into the world like, I am me, hear me roar, and take every single thing about me and you must absorb it. It's really about finding a way to present your authentic self that's true to you, but also sensitive and loving towards the world.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate your authenticity with, being honest about moments where you have been more harsh than now looking back, having that, 2020 hindsight and realizing like, I could have been a little bit softer there.
Yeah.
That's so important because the truth is not always well received if it's harsh.
Right.
We are very much, visual people, even Philly people. So if it's packaged in this beautiful package, then we can receive it hope maybe a little bit better than if it's packaged, all frumpy and ugly. At least for me, I'm like, oh, it's beautiful. What's in it? Let me open it up. Oh, it's truth. What beautiful truth I need to see. But if it's, ugly, I'm like, well, who are you sending this to? Like, this
Right.
is not for me. But one of the things that you said, Carrie, that I want to rewind back to, you said when you were defining authenticity and what it means to you, one of the images that I had in mind was about relationships.
Mm,
And so, in my work with clients and even with friends, that are dating, when we talk about relationships, I also talk to them about, okay, if you're not showing up as your true authentic self,
mhm.
if you're showing up as your representative, hoping to get this person to like you more or going with the flow so that you seem more compatible to them, one, that's only going to last for so long
Right.
because who you really are is going to come out. Who you really are is going to come out either when you're hungry, when you're mad, hungry,
Right.
mad, upset, like who you really are is going to come. It's going to surface at some point. And the truth is, imagine being so true and authentic and honest with your friends, your loved ones, your family members, that they love you for who you really are
Right.
and not the representation of that, and how deeply that love is, that you're like, man, me and all my stank, all my ugliness, and this person, this friend, this man, this woman, they still love me for me. Like that is some deep, genuine, authentic love right
Real
there.
love. And
Yeah.
I think the struggle with that a lot of people have is that willingness to be vulnerable,
Yes.
because your authentic self put out into the world can be rejected.
Mhm.
It can be frowned upon. It can be passively aggressive. These microaggressions that we sometimes experience, it can be really difficult. And so the willingness to go out into the world and say, this is really who I am,
Mhm.
and to believe that you can find relationships, whether they be romantic or professional or sisters, friends, whatever the case may be. To believe, you have to really believe and know that who you are authentically will be able to find someone that will love you for exactly who you are,
Right.
and the ability to rest in that.
Yes.
Because the vulnerability is the hard part, and vulnerability continues. The willingness to be vulnerable over time, even in the same relationship, can be a challenge. And so, kind of as we're talking about some of these challenges to showing our authentic self, my question to you, Mel, is, have you ever struggled to show your most authentic self, or maybe helped clients who were dealing with their ability to do that?
Right, absolutely. With clients, usually it's very much what you said, the struggles with vulnerability.
Mhm.
And as I've said openly, Hatters, on many of our episodes, working as a trauma focused therapist, I most times work with clients that have some sort of trauma history. And so naturally, some of that fear of vulnerability has been driven by some sort of trauma that has happened in the past. Naturally, the goal is to get them to a place where we've done some healing with that trauma and that they find strength, they find courage, they find confidence, and showing up, being open to be vulnerable and showing up as their true authentic self. And that feeling too of like, man, like I told so and so what happened to me and they still loved me
Mm.
regardless. They didn't change their relationship with me. And then that becomes rewarding for them and they want to show up more as their true authentic self. And the truth is, the more that we love who we are, like it's like I love me, like radical self-love, like love me or leave me, like it doesn't matter. Like the more that you love you, the more that you're going to want to show up as your authentic self, and the more pride you take in being you, and you're going to want to show more of you to the world and to other people. So those are some of the things that come to mind for me as I think about it personally. I would say, Carrie and I have talked openly about our challenges with vulnerability. We have a vulnerability hat. If you haven't heard it, check it out. But she and I talk, openly about that. And I think that, we can both say that we have some of the similar struggles when it comes to vulnerability is, and I think of vulnerability as like an onion, where it has many different layers. And clearly, the people that you are closer to or more intimate with, possibly you feel that you could peel back more of those layers. And sometimes that vulnerability is slowly peeling back a layer and letting more and more of you show, and then getting closer and closer to that core, depending on who, the person is. And that doesn't mean that you have to be, I don't believe that you have to be vulnerable with every single body that you meet. I believe that you get to choose who you decide to be vulnerable with and how much vulnerability you want to peel back and to expose.
I think, in fact, you should not be vulnerable with everyone. And I think the more practice that you're able to do it in a safe place, then you know what environments it makes
Mhm.
sense.
Right.
That onion makes sense because you peel that layer off and more of your insides are exposed.
Mm.
And those people that you're with, they're peeling all these layers and they have the most access to your insides. And I think that, that that process of being willing to try and peel. Sometimes it's just the thin skin of the onion. That's as far as you can get. And then as you go deeper, you might be able to expose some more of those layers. But, um, I would imagine another challenge is that sometimes people don't or are not enough in tune with what their core values are.
Absolutely.
And so I think that, we can sometimes have to do some work around what really matters to us, because we can decide what matters to us based on external factors, which some of those things we might absorb and say, oh, I absorb things from Mel all the time. And I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea. That's a new thing that I haven't really thought about. But ultimately, you've got to do some internal work to figure out what truly matters for you. What do you want to show up as in order to be your most authentic self? And that's also not necessarily an easy process to sit with yourself and think those things through.
Right. I agree with that. And some of that process comes through experience, comes through sitting with friends, having conversations, and being a critical thinker, being open and amenable to learn. And I think one of the important pieces with that process, too, and I'm thinking about Pastor Donald Bell as well, if you don't have those core values, or if you don't know who you are or your authentic self, then you are susceptible to being tossed to and fro. You
Mm-hmm.
show up in a situation, you're like, okay, I'm going over here. Okay, I'm going over here. Okay, that's what we're doing. Well, I'm going to do that too, where you're not making your own decisions for yourself. And I think the other piece of that too is that knowing your core values really helps with decision making. If
Right.
you know what your core values is or core values are, excuse me, and when it comes to having to make a decision about your life or your well-being, and you're making your decisions from that, then hopefully you're making decisions that give you a little bit more peace, rather than like, oh, well, I don't know what to do. Well, what would this person do? What would that person do? One day it could be decision A, and then the next day you're making decision B, because you're, being tossed to and fro. So those are things to consider as well as you're thinking about your core values and how that builds your true and authentic self. Um, Carrie, you asked me a little bit earlier about vulnerability and authenticity in my own my work with clients and my own personal experience. So I want to go back a little bit and talk about the personal experience, and maybe you've had this experience too. One thing that I've come to learn about me: the more comfortable I get in my skin, the older that I get, the more I feel like this is me. And there's this quote that circles around social media a lot, so many of you hatters may have heard it, which is, whatever you do, they're going to talk about you, whether you do it or you don't. So make a decision that resonates with you. So whether you go left or go right, there's going to be people that are going to have something to say. There's going to be people that are going to cheer you on, that are going to root for you, that are going to be inspired by you. And there's going to be people who are going to talk about you or gossip about you. So what that tells us is, do you, boo? Do you be authentic and true to you, because there's always going to be somebody who has something to say.
Because we're all different,
Yes.
right? And that is so cliche to say, but at the end of the day, what speaks to me, and Mel and I, you all have heard us over 100 episodes. Yay! I just want to say that again. Um, we agree on a lot, but we differ in a lot of ways. I mean, I always go back to the rose-colored glasses hat when I said, I think I can speak for me and Mel, and she was like, actually, you cannot speak for me.
I remember that.
And I took that, and I'm like, as much as I love her, and as similar as we are, and as many core values as I know we have in common, she's going to do things that I don't agree with, that I don't believe in, or that are not consistent with me and my life and how I live my life, or how my family lives, or whatever the case may be. And that's perfectly fine. You have to get to the point, I think, where, because you're so comfortable with yourself and the things that you know about yourself and that you believe to be true, it's okay to have differences. We agree to disagree. And that can be a great thing, because I feel like so many of the things that are authentic to Mel that are different from me, they make me think. And I'm like, oh man, like again, I don't see things from the same in the same way that she does. Even my husband, who you all have heard, who you guys have heard from our husbands in a couple of episodes. And he and I are very aligned in a lot of things, but we are different in so many ways. And he makes me think, he makes me act a little bit differently, not inconsistent with who I am at my core, but different in a way that helps me to be better. So I also don't want to make it seem as though being your authentic self means you set a boundary and you never move from that. Because I would imagine, Mel, as you became a mom, as you became a wife, as I become the mother, the child of a mother who needs more assistance, as all of these things in our lives are changing, our core values and the way that we look at them are challenged and maybe different and maybe added to or taken away. Things that were very important to me legitimately when I was 20 are different now that I'm in my 40s.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me, I don't think, any less fake. It doesn't make me, or it doesn't make me fake, or it doesn't make me any less authentic. It just means that I'm willing to change and adapt and move with the environment as life hits comes at me.
Right, right. And I agree. And so a couple things come to mind for me as you're speaking. One is my favorite quote, which is that change is inevitable.
Mm,
Like we are going to experience change no matter what. And the other thing that I'm hearing you say, Carrie, is that even though you're shifting and changing, I'm hearing that as I'm becoming even more true to who I am.
right.
Like I'm getting closer and closer to who I really am, rather than like, oh, you're changing. Oh, you're different now. No, I'm becoming more of me. And as we become more of ourselves, sometimes things around us change too, whether that's
Right.
friends, place of business, things that we're interested in, and that's okay as well. I really like your statement about, being your authentic self doesn't mean that you set a boundary and that boundary is like, concrete that it's not open to be shifted or changed, because I think that also being your authentic self, even especially with what Carrie said about me, that there are some things that I do differently, and she's like, oh, okay, that's how Mel does it, okay, cool. I think she also knows about me too, and I feel that I know this about her, is that even if I am doing something and I've made that decision, that we have the relationship and we have the what's the word I'm looking for, the
Grace.
not the grace,
Okay.
the rapport. That's the
Yes.
word. We have the rapport where she can pull my coattail. Where she's like, you know what, Mel? That's not right. Or, you know what? I know that's what you're doing right now, but I don't agree. And I will hear her out because we have that type of relationship. And so even though you can show up as your true, authentic self, that is the beauty of also being true and authentic to your friends and your circle, because you can have, or you should have, someone in your circle that can pull your coattail too.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
necessary.
Yes.
It's necessary.
Absolutely.
And I consider myself lucky that I do have those people. And and then you're going to have those people who, no matter what you do, they're going to cheerlead you. That can be, probably a good and a bad thing, because you do need people in your life who are going to support you regardless. But you definitely, and sometimes I feel like we both have gone to each other like, I need a reality check.
Yeah.
Am I being crazy here? Am I being ridiculous? Am I taking it too far? And I want the honest answer, because I
Absolutely.
know that I'll get it from her. I'm blessed to have a sister in my life who I know I can also go to. The other thing I'll say is, I'll go to you about things I may not go to my sister about,
Mhm,
and I'll
mhm,
go to Sanford about things I may not come to somebody else for.
mhm.
And I give a nod to the fact that I believe that I've built authentic relationships, but they're different.
Yes,
Again, there are different relationships that'll provide different needs
right.
in your life. And so
Absolutely.
I really just encourage people to know one person is not necessarily going to be the end all be all for all of your relationships, even if you have a fundamentally authentic relationship.
Yeah.
You'll have to assess what part of that relationship you are going to lean into, and what that person is going to be able to bring to your life.
Right, absolutely. And consider it or look at it as your board of directors. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you had a nonprofit, for profit, your board of directors isn't just going to be one person who's going to give you one way of thinking. Your board of directors is going to be a variety of people. One of them may be more versed in law, one of them may be more versed in finances. And so you want to have a board of directors for your life as well that can hold you accountable, but also accept you as you're on this journey of becoming more and more of your true, authentic self. Um, Again, here I am with a rewind. Carrie, as you were talking about, becoming more truer to your authentic self and you changing, and then having core values at at having core values as a mom of one, the values may look different as being a mom of two. And so some
Mm-hmm.
of the things that come to mind for me are, for example, I was raised being spanked. That was a form of discipline. And when I first became a mother, I thought, okay, well, that's how we discipline. And then my husband and I realized, like, no, we don't want to do that, you know? And so even though growing up as a woman of color in the South, as a Black woman in the South or in the Midwest, that was, you know, that was the norm,
Hmm.
you know? So
We were
then,
getting spankings out here on the West Coast too.
oh, I believe it because I came out here at an early age and those spankings were still happening. So I believe it. But, you know, it's okay to shift from something that, oh, we've always done this in our family,
Yes.
if it doesn't feel true and authentic to you. And so that is something that I want to share with our hatters and with ourselves today, that that's a reminder too, that like you can shift and change from your family or origin and still be true to your authentic self.
That's hard.
It is.
It can be very challenging to change things as you've known them your whole life.
Mhm.
And I will say, I am a fundamentally different mother than I otherwise would have been had I not taken this one, a mommy and me class
Mhm.
when my oldest was a baby, from a baby to his 1 year old. And I learned so many different ideas and concepts. The most, I think, palpable, which I've probably shared previously, which is don't parent from shame.
Mhm.
And that alone fundamentally changed the way I even saw being a mother and what being in the world as a mother, as a Black mother, right? Because you know, I'm not saying that we're the only ones who spank, but it's very much a part of our community. And it just fundamentally changed, I think, that my outlook on how I interacted with my son in the world. So, you know, I think you're so right, Mel, that sometimes as a part of that work about what really are our core values is we have to challenge things that we assume are core values but really are just things that have been taught to us to be important, to be right, and to be willing and brave enough to maybe make a change that's better for your family, and then to go through the tide of what that looks like in terms of potential judgment from
Mhm.
the people around you. So my children don't sit still in the way that I'm sure I sat still when I was a kid.
Right, because you're probably
And
threatened like all of
right,
us who are this age. Like, don't you go in here? Don't you ask for nothing?
right,
Don't
right.
you?
And I give the speeches. I do stuff. I do things that I, you know, in trying to, you know, achieve the level of conformance that I would like. But you know, my kids are not the same, and I think it is, and that could be, I don't wear, you know, back in the 70s everybody had a press, right? But I wear my hair naturally in all kinds of different styles, and so that judgment can come in a variety of different ways. But being, I think, really being authentic means being willing and brave enough to say, well, this is important enough to me that I'm going to move forward with it. And then also, I think what we also would like to share, I think Mel actually already shared it, is on the other side of that, it's so often so much better than you think it's going to be. There are always going to be some people who will have comments or have thoughts or have, you know, their input, but there will be so many people who will be supporting you, and you know what? This is who you are and I accept it. And I think, as you said earlier, people who are authentic are magnets. I can't tell you how many times I've had, even as recently as a few weeks ago, a friend of mine that I'm in an organization with, and she's like, I just want to tell you, one of the things I love most about you is whatever room you walk into, you show up as your authentic self. She used that word
I
authentic.
love that. It's a
I
beautiful
know who you
compliment.
are.
Yeah.
And you don't hold any punches, you know. And I try to not punch people with who I am, but you know, it really, you're right. It is a compliment. Like, I really appreciated that, because she, you know, she could have said you're pretty or you're smart or whatever, any number of things, but to know that I present myself in a way that seems to be authentic, or that
Mhm.
is authentic, and that it's received positively. That's really my point. That as loud as I am and as obnoxious as I am and as mean as I sometimes think I may be, who I am authentically is received in this world.
Absolutely. And for me, it makes you more trustworthy.
Yeah.
And it makes other people that I know more trustworthy because I know what I'm going to get.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's on like a bad day, I don't want to be bothered. Like, I know what that looks like and what I'm going to get. But if
Right.
you weren't your authentic self, then it could be a very timid relationship where it's like, I don't know who Carrie's going to show up as today. So let me put my armor on, let me this, let me that. And I think that, having a friendship or business relationship or any type of relationship with someone that you fully trust
Yeah.
is so important, and authenticity and trust go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So, Kerri, we've been talking about authenticity. We've been keeping it 100 for our 100th episode. We're saying that over and
Hey,
over again,
over and
Hatters,
over
over and over
again.
again. Let's talk a little bit about authenticity when it comes to this podcasting journey.
Yes.
What do you want to tell our Hatters? Like, what's your truth, when it comes to this podcasting journey? I haven't heard it, Hatters, so let's hear it. Let's hear it.
You heard that deep sigh.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Truthfully, this podcast has really, it's taught me a few things. One, I was afraid. I remember one of the first, when we were launching the podcast, and I sent it to a friend of mine, and she was like, "Oh, congratulations, great job." And I'm like, "I know, I have no idea how this is going to be received." And she's like, "But you still did it anyway." And I was like, "Okay, you're right. I'm willing to open myself up in a very real way on we've talked about divorce. We've talked about vulnerability. We've talked about being a Black woman. We've had some pretty anger. I could go on and on, some really intense topics. And I can honestly say, I don't think there's been a moment where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to say that because I don't want to offend anyone, or I don't want to come off too angry, or whatever the case may be. I've tried to certainly say things with tact and with respect and appropriately, but I feel as though, in spite of my fear, I have tried to be my most authentic self. And the other thing I'll say is, it's been very gratifying. And I've shared this with Mel, particularly on, I think, the creative hat. And Mel really inspired. I don't think she fully appreciates, but she really inspired me on that episode. That I actually do have creativity within me, which I just very often doubt. But I also doubt at times that people even care. Like, how dare I believe that somebody out there wants to hear what I have to say? Like, nobody cares. I say that to myself far more often than I should. And I think that this podcast has shown me that people do care. And not that I'm super extra profound, but we do offer something to people. We've received so much positive feedback from people. You're doing good work. This inspired me. This was right on time. Or, oh, dang, I wish that I had had this podcast when I was, a young mother, or whatever the case may be. And so I think, authentically, it's been scary, but it's been so gratifying. And I've just been so grateful for every person out there who has just taken a moment to listen to what we have to say.
Right.
What about
right.
you?
I agree. So much in that. Like, I want to unpack all of that. My gosh. And I didn't know that we were going to need tissues for this episode. I wish somebody would have
Oh.
told me. But I remember the creative hat, and Hatters, when I tell you, Kerri fought me on that episode. Like, it was just sitting on the list of ideas. And I was like, "Kerri, we have this one right here." She's like, "Mel, I don't really, I don't." And I was just like, "Listen, we are doing this episode." And I really had to help her to see, like, the creative side in her, and the creative juices that she has. And this woman is a wealth of ideas. Let me tell you, like, there's so many other behind the scenes stuff that she wants us to do. And I'm just like, another hat? Like, I don't know. But, and I didn't know, Kerri, for you, that when you were talking in the beginning, as we were creating, like, the episodes, when you were making those statements of, like, who wants to listen to me, or who's going to listen to I didn't see that as coming from a place of fear, but now I understand it. So, Hatters, when Kerri was saying that, like, I really had to get into her. I said, "Kerri, you have to stop saying nobody's going to want to listen to us." I said, that is not of my mindset. That I don't think that way. That is a scarcity mindset. You have to think about all the people who are going to listen, even if it's 5 of y'all listening. Thank you. Thank you. And, those 5 care, and so I really had to get into her, and she got better, and she has been better. So I appreciate that. Thank you for shifting your mindset and your thoughts on that. But, some of my truths, when, as I've said in other episodes, when Kerri approached me with the idea, I was like, yeah, let's do it. Come on, let's go, and part of that for me was, I thought too that we could work well together, that we've said in other episodes, we're very much alike in a lot of ways. So I knew that business would get handled. The other thing too, I don't know if I said this in any other episode, but I know I've said it in other public speaking engagements, which is when I decided or when I knew that I was going to become a therapist, God said to me, that will be your beginning. That will be the start of you helping other people, but it is not your end. And so I've always envisioned that who I am as a therapist and how I help other people, that it's not just the one to many model in which I work in my private practice, but I'm sorry, the one to one model of my private practice, but the one to many. And I see that as in my book writing, in my public speaking. I didn't think of it as podcasting. And even when Kerri invited me and said, like, hey, let's do this together, I still didn't think about it. But the more episodes that we put out there and the more feedback that we get from other people, from our hatters who are like, thank you for that episode, the more I realize I am doing that very thing that God told me that I would be doing, which impacting the lives more than just one to one in my office. And so for that, I am so grateful for the opportunity and the experience, and so grateful for you hatters who, listen to us and who let us into your homes, into your cars, into your ears, wherever you listen. And we recently celebrated Kerri's birthday, and I met some of her friends and family that I've never met before. And they were like, you're Mel, you're Melissa. We love the Hats podcast. And so that just warmed my heart too. And just such reminders that we are where we're supposed to be, which is awesome, to have that affirmation. And the other thing, in full transparency and true authenticity, or being completely authentic, excuse me, goodness gracious. Sometimes it's hard. There, Kerri and I have also been open about being in the season of remodeling our homes. I remember clearly the season of my husband and I redoing our floors was, one, the most stressful for me because everything was a mess. And then two, I was not showing up, and I knew that I was not showing up in the way that I could or that I should. Kerri never questioned me. She never asked. She never said, Mel, what's going on with you? Like, she knew what was going on behind the scenes, but she never shamed me for not being able to carry the weight like I normally did. She just picked up the slack and, provided so much grace, maybe in ways that she doesn't even realize, because your girl would be late. I show up, be like, oh, I'm logging on now. 5 minutes late. We have guests waiting. She goes, don't worry, I'm here. She'll show up early because she knows I'm going to be late. I mean, just in those ways, but at no point has been like, Mel, get your stuff together. Because she knows I know I need to get my stuff together. But I do appreciate her grace and her compassion. And Kerri and I have a lot of ideas about what we want to do with the Hats podcast. There are days where we're like, we need to invest in this. We need an assistant. We need to do this. We need to do that. And then there are days where we're like, well, what if we're just small and mighty and we just got 5 listeners and that's fine. But one thing that we do for sure is that we show up, we record, and we put an episode out. Mm-hmm. And that's what we committed to doing. So we're going to continue to do that.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, so much in that. It's so nice when you don't realize that you're being a blessing to other people. And I think it's, I mean, maybe I feel like I overshare. So I'm constantly telling Mel like how much she pours into my life. That is a word that is a word that I got from Melissa, pouring into a life. Like, that is such a thing that she does all the time. So, I'm glad that, during that difficult time, yeah, I don't ever question it. And I think, it kind of is what it is. We do have a million ideas. We have a million things we want to do. And I feel very blessed and privileged that we're able to do it together. Yeah. And, Hatters, I think, we are so grateful to have the opportunity to have any impact. If it's one person, and that is something that, I was like, is it going to be enough? It is enough. And that's it's well, but it is hard. I mean, you are right. There are days when we're, it's in between the 15 other things that, Melissa will do a post, or I'll reach out to a guest, or however, we're dividing things or flipping things around. But there's so much joy that I think we both get from this. So
right. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I agree. And the piece about pouring and full authenticity, I have come to learn that I am very much a pourer, if that's a
Mm-hmm.
word. And so time and experience has taught me that I have to be mindful of where and who I pour into.
Mm-hmm.
And time and experience has also taught me that I am also fulfilled by being poured into. So even though you make this statement that I pour into you, that is reciprocated, that like you pour into me in a lot of ways that maybe you don't even realize or that I haven't expressed. So know that the pouring is pouring in receiving.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
So let's pour into our hatters a little bit because one thing that we always do is we offer tips,
Hmm.
right? So let's talk a bit, let's give some tips for how people, if you're struggling with being and showing up as your most authentic self, or you kind of just want to dive a little bit deeper into this topic. Mel, I'll start with you. What are some tips that you have for people who are on this journey to being their more authentic self?
I would say first spend some time with yourself. Find out who you really are. Because if you cannot show up as your authentic self, or not if you cannot, you will not be able to show up as your true authentic self if you don't know who you are. So start there. In my personal experience, when I was single prior to being married, I learned so much about me. Like I would go to church on Sundays, I would leave church and I'd pack me a little snack and a journal and a book, and I would go to a park and just like pour into myself. During that time, I was reading, personal development books and just learning more about who I was, trying new places in LA and Hollywood that I was like, oh, I want to go there. Oh, I've never been there. Oh, I never tried that beach. I would go on road trips to San Diego by myself. Like I learned so much about me because I spent time with me. But if you're constantly filling your space with things and other people and noise, you're never really going to learn who you really are. So the first tip would be to start with learning who you really are. What do you like? What do you don't like? What is what is okay with you? What excites you? What drives you? What motivates you? What inspires you? Start there.
I think similarly, exploring what your passions are, what comes naturally to you and what excites you, because and the things that excite you, if even if you have to work toward them, if the work itself is enjoyable and you have a good time doing it, then it doesn't so much feel like work. And if you're able to really hone in on what your passions are, it will clue you in to what it is that's really in your core. And I think the other thing is, and I said a little bit earlier, is to be brave, because oftentimes this is not easy. Even as comfortable as I am presenting my most authentic self, I'd still get rejected in a variety of different ways, and the things that I have to offer people don't necessarily want. And I'll just give an example in my professional life. As I was entering our family business, I had a lot of ideas about how we could do things different, better, bigger, bolder. And they were kind of like, we doing things just fine over here. So we don't need all these ideas. And I had to sit with that because my authentic self is to walk into a place and to have impact. I want to have impact. I want to help. I want to add value. And that was very specifically like, no, we don't need you to do that right now. Go do these other things. In the meantime, learn some more, and get some more experience, things of that nature. So that wasn't that long ago that I experienced that, and from my family business. So be brave. Be willing to accept that sometimes things will be rejected about you, and that's okay. That doesn't make that thing in you bad somehow.
Right.
It just means in that moment, in that space, with that person, that environment, it's not welcome in that moment. But now, on a daily basis, I consider myself to have impact in my family business. So it just took some time to get there. So don't necessarily think that because an immediate reaction is not the one that you want, that it's necessarily negative or it's necessarily bad, because there's room. So I think my last tip would be keep trying, because if you don't really know yourself well, you may think, okay, this is who I am. I am this person. Let me go out and do this. And that may not be it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've done anything wrong. You just may have to keep searching and keep trying and keep exploring. I love, Mel's comment that she did all these different things. She journaled, she traveled, she talked to herself, all sorts of things. And my mom said, that's fine as long as you don't answer back.
I heard that
So
too.
But you're going to go on this journey, if it doesn't necessarily come natural to you, but be willing to give yourself some grace along the journey and to keep trying because as I said earlier, we're constantly discovering who our most authentic selves are, and that's going to show up differently in different environments.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And truth be told, Hatters, I'm in a place in my life now where I will talk back sometimes. I'm like, nah, girl, we're not doing that. Or I'll have a thought, be like, we said we're not having those thoughts no more. Remember? Oh, yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. You're right. You're right. You're
Right.
right.
You're right. You're right. You're right.
So, you have to allow your inner coach to be louder than your inner bully.
Yes.
So there are a couple things that you said, Kerri, that I would like to add on as like my additional tips. One, you said, I heard you talk about timing and you showing up and having these big, brave, bold ideas, which is so you. I love it. Timing, and I'm of the mindset that like what God has for me is good. And what God has for me, he's not going to want to keep it from me, but it's all about the timing. His timing is not always my timing. So even though it is a no, sometimes a no is a no right now. And sometimes a no is a no of protection. Like, ooh, I'm glad God didn't
Mm,
let me do that because woo child.
yes.
And sometimes it's like, oh, I get why I didn't do that X amount of years ago because looking at how things worked out, it makes sense. So timing is a big piece of it too. The other thing, when it comes to authenticity, and I've said it earlier and I'm going to say it again because I think it's worth being repeated, which is to do you. Like being authentic is doing you and being your true self. Someone may be like, "Yes, I like ketchup on that too." And someone may be like, "Oh, that's gross." And I'm actually thinking of my daughter right now. She likes ketchup. She's in a phase of her life where she likes ketchup on everything. And they're like, oh, would you put ketchup, my
Woo!
sons are like, would you put ketchup on this? Would you put ketchup on that? No matter how they respond to her putting ketchup on everything, it does not stop her from putting ketchup on everything because
Hmm.
she loves it. She shows up to the dining table, her authentic self, which is with the bottle of ketchup. And I'm like, you do you, boo. You like ketchup? That's for you. And so do you, regardless of what other people are going to have to say. Some people are going to be happy that you like ketchup. Some people are going to be mad. But at the end of the day, you're going to sleep well at night knowing that you made a decision that is true for you.
That's right. That's right. So, Hatters.
That's all I have for you, Hatters. Do you have
Yeah.
something else, Kerri?
I don't think I have anything else. The only thing I would say is maybe we can spend a moment talking about um, we do us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we encourage other people to do the same, but everyone doesn't always show up as their most authentic self.
True.
What would you say are some signs that perhaps you're dealing with someone who's not bringing their most authentic self, and what you do when you figure that out?
Mm. Dishonesty, I think, is a
Mm,
big piece for me. Catching them either in lies or incongruency, is a big one for me. Um, And sometimes when people are hurt or hurting or in pain, they may have a hard time showing up as their authentic self because they are not ready to be vulnerable or to present that pain to someone else. I think that's a piece. And one thing that I'm big about for myself and that I teach my clients is noticing how your nervous system responds.
mm.
Because and I'm sure we've all heard our parents or some elderly in our family say it, when you walk in that room and you feel the hairs on the back of your neck, girl, get out. Like, pay attention to that. And so noticing how your body responds to the presence of that person. Do you feel relaxed, calm, at ease? Do you feel that you can be yourself? Or do you feel uneasy? Do you feel anxiety? Do you feel something a little bit more than like nervousness? So paying attention and stepping inside of your own body and just noticing like, when I'm around so and so or this group, my nervous system feels calm and at ease. When I'm not, my nervous system is sparking and going off and giving me all type of alerts. Notice that. Pay attention to that. It's happening for a reason.
Hmm. I think I have those same thoughts, and I think the idea of what happens when you do get around someone who is not their authentic self, it becomes very evident in your ongoing communications and your interactions with them. So if you're going to have more than one interaction with them and you start to see, take them for who they present themselves as. And if they present as a liar, they're a liar. If they present as somebody who is disrespectful to waiters and waitresses, they're disrespectful. If there's someone who is completely estranged from everybody in their family for no reason that they are able or willing to communicate to you, take that as a sign and don't assume that somehow what you present and your authentic self is going to change that person.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Because that's not happening. They have to want to change on their own.
Right.
Um, Hatters, this has been an amazing journey. We're so excited to be here with you today. We're so excited to come to you in this capacity. We hope that you have enjoyed your time with us just as we've enjoyed our time with you and with one another. It is our 100th episode. It is the beginning of
Yay!
our 5th season, and we could not have done this without you. So, from the bottom of my heart, from the bottom of my toes to the tips of my head to my everything, thank you, thank you, thank you. I am so grateful and so honored, and I can't wait to see you at the next episode.
Yes, I will. I can't say it any better than her, other than from my truest, most authentic self in my heart. I consider myself to be a person who thrives on gratitude, and I truly feel grateful to all of you who have tuned in today, to all of you who will watch this in the future, and to anyone who is kind enough to let us into their cars, their headphones, whatever the case may be. Thank you so much for being a hatter. We sincerely appreciate you.
Absolutely. And so I can't leave without the shameless plug. If you're not following me or Kerri, please do that. If you're not following the Hats podcast, please do that. You can catch us on all social media outlets. You can listen to our episodes on anywhere that you listen to your podcast. We would appreciate that. Subscribe, download, leave a review, tell a friend, post it on your social media, all the things. We would
All the
truly appreciate
things.
it. Thank you so much, Hatters, for listening. We tip our hats to you.